Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of this podcast with me. As you may have noticed, I took a break away from creating content and podcasts last year. And the reason for that was because I was going through a lot of grief personally and processing quite a bit of different things, which was very difficult, but it also contributed to a deepening of my ability to integrate what happens in life, what happens within me. And so today we're going to be talking about integration and fragmentation. Another thing that I realized by taking a break was that I want to place all of my energy on what truly matters, which is the message. So there will be no more intros and bells and whistles. It will just be me showing up here and talking to you about topics that I find are relevant on this path of awakening, self-discovery, trauma recovery, and chronic symptoms and chronic pain. And so what I'd like you to do is, if you can just take a moment to just pause, feel where your body is touching whatever is holding you, whether it's a chair, a couch, the floor, the bed, your car seat, the kitchen bench, whatever it is. Just notice your frame, notice where you are, notice your body, your breath, notice your jaw, your shoulders, your feet, your legs. Not to change anything, just to notice. Because today we're talking about integration and fragmentation. But integration always begins with presence. Not productivity, not understanding, not fixing, but presence. And if that already feels uncomfortable to you, then good. That's actually relevant. So today we're going to talk about what integration really is, why symptoms are not the enemy, why so many people stay stuck for years, and why calm is a wildly overrated myth. So we'll talk about vertigo, tinnitus, anxiety, nervous system symptoms, chronic sensations, chronic pain, and all kinds of issues. The part that no one tells you, which is what these experiences are asking of you as a human being. And I also want to highlight that this is not a medical podcast. This is not a just regulate harder podcast. This is not a positive mindset podcast. This is a wholeness podcast. So if you're listening while secretly hoping I'll give you the one thing that will make everything stop, I just want to apologize in advance, because that's not going to happen. What I will give you is something far more useful, which is a way to come home to yourself. So what is integration? Well, integration is that capacity to stay with yourself as something intense is happening, as something stressful is happening, and to eventually make sense of what is happening. So not immediately, not intellectually, and not by forcing meaning, but by living through the experience without abandoning yourself. So for example, a person with high integration can feel intensity without panicking, or stay connected to their body, or allow sensations and emotions and feelings to move through them. So they can reflect on their life context, they can adjust how they live, they can return to balance without needing to erase the experience. So it's not the absence of distress, it's the ability to metabolize experience, metabolize life, metabolize what's happening. So to put it in a simple way, it's basically having capacity to deal with life, having a higher level of tolerance for stress and whatever it is that happens to us in life, as well as what is happening within us, right? What comes through from within. So if you imagine two people experiencing, for example, vertigo, person A, who might have an integrated response, will wake up dizzy, their heart's racing, they feel disorientated, and instead of immediately thinking, oh my God, something's wrong with me, they pause, they sit, they breathe, they feel the floor, they notice without, they notice the fear without becoming fear. And then over time, that person starts noticing the patterns. Okay, so this began during an intense work period, or this began during a time in my life where I was going through some stuff. Okay, so I have overridden exhaustion. I have been swallowing my anger. I have been living for approval. My life has become more narrow and rigid. So they don't force insight. They let it arrive. Yeah? And eventually that story, I guess, makes sense, right? This body state, this vertigo arrived because something in my life has become unsustainable. And so I need to change that. I need to change my work rhythm. I need to have boundaries. My relationships need some balancing. I need some, a different pace. My expectations of myself need to change. And as that internal loop completes, the symptoms no longer need to speak and scream. So the loop looks like this. Symptom, which leads to discomfort, which leads to curiosity, which then leads to insight, which then leads to behavior change, and then the settling of symptoms. So the body exhales, and that's integration. Okay? So symptoms are very intelligent. They're not malfunctions. They're not the problem, they are the message. Your body's not attacking you, it's communicating. And these symptoms that we have in any shape or form, I have worked with every single condition you can imagine under the sun. Every single condition that perhaps cannot be explained even medically. And from that experience of working with people with all kinds of symptoms, including going through it myself, I have realized that the body is never attacking us, it's just communicating. And so symptoms arise when you have outgrown how you're living, or you're betraying your truth, you're not being authentic, you're people pleasing, you're performing, instead of inhabiting your life, you're surviving instead of living. And here's the uncomfortable part. The body doesn't actually negotiate, right? So if you don't listen when it whispers, it will speak louder. Not because it's cruel, but because it's precise. And I often say the body is the last place truth lands when it's been ignored everywhere else. And when I'm talking about truth, I'm talking about your truth. What is your truth? Because we're always bypassing our feelings, our needs. We're either gaslighting ourselves or being gaslit by culture and other people. And we're bypassing constantly. This is why the majority of people in today's culture are dissociated. They're so dissociated. I mean, for the last couple of weeks, as there's been all these different demonstrations in Iran, which is my cultural heritage, and so much has been felt from within me because I grew up, as a refugee child. I grew up in a war zone. There was so much displacement, so much trauma. And so that rage that has been activated from within me because of the enormous suppression that the people over there have been experiencing for the last 47 years under Islamic dictatorship brought up everything from anger, grief, sadness, hopelessness, helplessness, wanting to do something. And so I started to share a little bit more about this topic on social media. And immediately within a few days, I lost over, I think it was over 100 followers or something ridiculous. Because most people just don't have capacity to hold their own pain, nevertheless other people's pain. Especially in the West, we're so scared of feelings and emotions that we don't have capacity for compassion even. We can get almost to the point where we just go, oh, this is too much. I don't even want to look at that. I just want to put my head in the sand. I just want to ignore it. Even though a lot of people in certain countries don't have any other source of help or support other than the voices of people, who live in countries where I guess the truth can be heard, right? The truth can be seen. When you've been living in an Islamic dictatorship, truth is the one thing that is constantly taken away, crushed, diminished. Truth and freedom. Like in that particular country, there's actually no other country in the world who's experienced something as horrific as what people are going through in Iran, because you're not allowed to sing, you're not allowed to have any kind of joy, hold hands, drink alcohol, you're not allowed to dance, you're not allowed to listen to music. Like there's so much suppression of the feminine energy. So it's quite a horrific environment in that sense, if you think about it from that perspective, that for so many years people have been suppressed and pretty much not allowed to have absolute basic human rights. So sharing that, witnessing that, has brought up a whole bunch of stuff for me personally, because it's made me realize, so many people in this particular culture don't have capacity to even look at this stuff, right? And that can bring up everything from grief, loneliness, like there's no one to talk to about this stuff. There's no one who cares. And so that truth, which is my truth that lands in my body, is something that I had to look at. Yeah, something that I had to completely be present to. Then this is what I'm talking about when I say the body is the last place truth lands, where it's been ignored everywhere else, right? And this is especially true for people who are highly responsible, highly empathic, highly achieving, socialized to cope, rewarded for endurance. Because your nervous system learns from a very early age that I survive by pushing through until it doesn't. And so for me, in this example that I just gave, I had to learn to sit with that grief, feel through that grief, write about it, and do everything I can to express it somehow, which is through speaking up for the people, because it's the only way you feel like you can do something. That helplessness is something that I needed to channel in some way. So fragmentation is something different, right? Fragmentation is not pathology, it's not weakness, it's not a flaw. It's what happens when experience doesn't get completed, right? When stories don't get an ending. So if you don't feel your grief, if you don't express your rage, if you have unmet needs, if you have unlived choices, if you have abandoned your truth, that's when fragmentation happens, right? Because that doesn't disappear. These things get lodged in the body. Yeah, they lodge themselves in the body. And it looks like this. Symptoms arise, fear takes over, there's an urgency to fix it. You need to go to doctors, get your scans, get your tests, and then you either hear nothing's wrong, or we can't find the cause, or you'll need more tests. And then there's confusion, and then there's partial relief at best, and then symptoms persist, and then there's this identity that forms that my body's broken, and this is something I have to live with, and there's no point to this. And so years pass, and something subtle happens. That person stops asking, what is this asking of me, and starts believing there's nothing I can do. And that belief alone keeps the loop open, okay? So fragmented systems can't offer wholeness. Most healthcare systems are fragmented by design. They look at a scan, they look at a number, they look at the results, they look at a system. And even though I always tell my clients, go and get your tests done, make sure it's all, nothing serious is going on. Because of course, I'm not a health physician. It's absolutely something that you got to do. You got to get yourself checked. But that particular model, the medical model, rarely asks what was happening in my life when this particular symptom began, or what is happening currently in my life that's making these symptoms so loud. Because that question is very unsettling in that model. It doesn't fit a protocol. It requires complexity, and complexity is inconvenient. It doesn't mean that medicine is wrong, not at all. It means that it's partial, right? So integration requires narrative, a beginning, a middle, and end. Integration is what leads to wholeness. Fragmentation doesn't, okay? And the reason why integration works and is important is because only you live your beginning, your middle, and your end. No health professional, no professional can integrate your life for you. They can support you, they can guide you, they can reflect, but the integration happens inside your nervous system. So how do we do this? Well, I always say body scan as a way of living. Pause, notice what you notice. Not once, not occasionally, but as a way of living. Ask yourself, where do I feel expanded? Where do I feel contracted? Who drains me? Who nourishes me? Where am I performing? Where am I honest? Where do I feel safe being seen? Where am I constantly bracing? These questions are not philosophical, but they shape your stress hormones, muscle tone, your breath, your immune function, your nervous system threshold. This is the art of listening, not fixing, not analyzing, but listening. And whenever, we try to get to this place of just being calm, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice. Calm is not the goal. Yeah? So let's talk about nervous system culture for a moment. There's this dangerous idea floating around that, and it comes from polyvagal theory, which is, we now know that was a little bit limited because it's a great, theory, the polyvagal theory. I mean, it's not even a theory. It describes the nervous system and how to support the nervous system. But it also gives you this idea that if you're regulated, you have to be calm, or you're always calm. And that's not true, because sometimes calm is freeze, the freeze state, or frozen, or collapse, or being fawning, people pleasing. Sometimes calm is numbing. It looks peaceful, but it's actually disconnected. So integration is not about staying calm. Integration is the capacity to stay present across all states. Chaos, activation, fear, collapse, grief, rage. These states are not problems. They are information. So when I was sharing about what I was feeling, or what is going on for the people of Iran right now, and how they are fighting this incredibly, suppressive, evil regime without guns, but just with pure heart and courage, not even using anything other than rocks because they don't have access to guns. I was tapping into my rage. I was tapping into my grief. And so integration is the capacity to be with these things. These are not problems. These states are not problems. They are information. And unfortunately, we live in a culture where if you are in any of these states, or if you are sharing or expressing those things, it's seen as not being balanced, not being calm, not being in control. And that's completely inaccurate, right? Because if you aim only for calm in your life, you bypass the wisdom. And bypassing creates fragments. And this is why people avoid themselves. Most people avoid their bodies because, not because they're lazy, but because sensation is intense. Uncertainty is scary. No one taught them how to feel safety. Their system learned that feeling equals danger. So they turn away again and again. They chase certainty, they chase fixing, they chase answers, and this makes sense, but it keeps stories unfinished. Within the nervous system, it keeps stories unfinished. So integration requires tolerance for not knowing, tolerance for uncertainty. Clarity doesn't arrive on time. It arrives when the body feels safe enough to reveal it. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. That's why you can't rush healing. That's why you can't just go to therapy for a few sessions and then go, oh, I feel good now. Okay, no worries. I've got my answers. I'll do it myself. Forcing certainty often prolongs symptoms. And this is also why people stay symptomatic. Yeah? So, here we are. Living in fragmentation is not easy. It's everywhere, and it's not easy. It's kind of what's been normalized. But neither is integration. Okay? One keeps you looping. So fragmentation keeps you looping. Integration, the other, asks you to stay, to feel, to listen, to trust. So the real question isn't how do I stop what's happening in my body, but rather who am I becoming through what's happening? What is my beginning? What is my middle? What is my end? And there are thousands of unfinished stories inside each of us. Okay? So if you're not looking at all the things that have been suppressed throughout your life, even if it's just a matter of acknowledging it to yourself or having some form of, self-reflection and relationship with yourself on a day-to-day basis where you tune inwards as opposed to constantly being outward focused, it's going to be very difficult for you to integrate. I really believe this is why, this journaling process called Journal Speaks by Nicole Sachs has been so popular and it has worked for a lot of people. It's because you kind of pretty much write down everything that stresses you and you give it some of your attention every day. You write about one thing that is on your list of different various stressors from your childhood up until now in your life, including your personality traits and aspects of yourself that can be stressful. And you just give it some of your attention and you write about it. It's because it takes away from the bypassing. Now, I'm not saying that we stay there, okay? We're not wanting to stay in the past, stay in the stories, and regurgitate them, because that's not helpful either. So from a neuroplasticity perspective, integration is not about constantly revisiting the past over and over again, but rather it's about completing unfinished neural loops. Okay? So, integration happens when your nervous system learns that I can feel this and I can be present. This intensity moves and resolves. I'm not back there, I'm here. I don't need to escalate and I don't need to suppress. So that learning only happens through felt experience, not just through insight. And so the rule is that we work with the present sensation, not the historical story. So when you're sitting there and you're writing about something that's stressful, you're allowing yourself to feel. You're allowing yourself to maybe, express your truth and perhaps express your rage or have a cry or express your sadness. And this is what I'm talking about. Okay? So the past only matters insofar as it shows up now in the body. Okay? The only reason we go back is because what's happened is impacting what's happening now. So I'm going to give you guys one practical, exercise that you can implement on a daily basis. And that is to find one real sensation that's happening right now in your body. So for example, tension in your jaw, tightness in your chest, buzzing in the legs, or a lump in your throat, or pressure in your eyes, or numbness in the belly, whatever it is. And then place gentle attention on it. So describe it neutrally. It feels tight, it feels warm, it feels heavy, it feels sharp, it feels dense. Just describe it. No meaning, no story, no fixing. This trains interoceptive tolerance, okay? And you let it move. So this is the neuroplastic gold. Staying with the sensation just long enough to notice. Does it shift when I just stay with it? Does it spread when I stay with it? Does it soften when I stay with it? Does it intensify when I stay with it? Does something else appear? Okay, so your job is not to calm it. Your job is to stay present while it changes. And this teaches your brain, I can feel intensity without catastrophizing. Sensation is dynamic, it's not static. I don't need to escape. I don't need to fix. And every time you do this, you weaken the old fear circuits in your brain and strengthen new safety circuits. Yeah? So that is literal synaptic rewiring. Okay? And this is where integration happens without story looping. So you ask yourself, if this sensation had a simple message for my life right now, what would it be? Just now, okay? And it could be, I'm pushing too hard. I need more rest. I'm over-responsible. I'm holding something I don't need to hold. I'm ignoring a boundary. And then stop. So you don't elaborate, you don't psychoanalyze, you don't spiral. You just embrace the insight. And then based on that insight, you make a life choice, okay? Whether it's to change that or to actually say to yourself, you know what? I'm choosing to do this and I want to keep continuing doing this. So for example, you might just decide, if you're wanting to make some changes, that, okay, one small embodied shift is to maybe take a break at work when I normally would skip my break, right? Or say no instead of yes, or slow my walking pace or my talking pace. Maybe I'm going to cancel one unnecessary task or eat, when I'm hungry as opposed to push through. Maybe I'm going to stop proving myself to other people. So this completes that integration loop. That sensation gives me awareness, which gives me meaning, which then leads to action, which then settles my symptoms. Yeah? It's like you use your body as a vessel for information, for wisdom, and for truth, as opposed to thinking that your body is something you have to fix and there's something wrong with it, and you completely dismiss and deny the intelligence that it carries, which is, of course, a practice, because our medical model has a completely different approach to all of this. It's all about bypassing the wisdom of the body. And so what I'm saying is the opposite. Embrace that wisdom, because that's what leads to wholeness, which in turn supports your nervous system, supports you to be in your own power, supports you to actually be the leader of your life and your health and everything else, right? You can also use some of the following, questions instead of trauma narrative stuff that keeps you stuck in the past. So for example, what is my body asking for today? And whatever it is, you listen to that. You don't get into your head and analyze it and push through. You respect and honor that. And this is how we build self-trust. So it could be, my body's asking me to rest even though my mind's telling me to go to the gym, right? My body's asking me to drink more water even though I feel like I've already had enough water. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, ask yourself, what is my body asking for today? What feels unsustainable right now? Where am I overriding myself? What am I tolerating that I don't need to tolerate? What is one small choice that would create more ease for me? So these questions activate what we call medial prefrontal cortex, vagal turn, self-agency circuitry, instead of this default mode that most of us are in, okay? And this is also how we can stop allowing the conditioning and our trauma narratives, as well as that, that program of the past, to hijack us again and again and again. So the reason integration works is because it trains your brain to stay online during intensity, and it builds vagal tone and interoceptive safety. Okay, so it strengthens that self-regulation pathway in the brain, and it links the insight that you have to embodied action. So in other words, you're basically teaching your brain a new relationship to sensations. You're not suppressing it, you're not dramatizing it, you're not intellectualizing it, you're relating to it, and that's integration. Okay, so it's not about understanding, but it's about staying present with what's happening long enough for new meaning to form. Even though, of course, we do need to understand our past, I definitely believe that, it's not about staying stuck there, yeah? It's really about looking at, okay, the reason I can get caught up in my conditioning and in the way that I, sometimes behave and my personality traits is because of my past, because of what I had to do, how I thought I had to be, who I thought I had to be to cope with that particular environment that I grew up in. But that's done, that's finished. I don't have to do that anymore. And so this meaning making always wants to move you towards more truth, more ease, more self-respect, more agency, more aliveness, okay? So you don't need to relive your trauma. You don't need to analyze your childhood forever and ever. You don't need to build a perfect narrative. You just need presence, tolerance for sensation, curiosity without urgency, and little behavioral shifts that help you to change, the pattern, right? And that's how the nervous system learns. That's how fragments, integrate. That's how you come home to yourself without getting stuck in the past. And this is also how we start to feel more confident and more safe in ourselves despite any internal symptom. As I come to the end of this podcast episode, I just want to leave you with this. Healing isn't about becoming calm, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness only happens when nothing inside you is left behind. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, please take care. Bye for now.